Hello, everyone.
We are live.
We're live, and we're back with another installment of our Cloud Integration Partners Cloudcast with a very exciting guest of ours, Jamie Johns, who I've worked with for a number of years in the past, and I've always enjoyed sort of our conversations, Jamie, and you've always been a very inspiring and innovative business owner and mentor in the field. And so we thought that it would be really appropriate to have just an ad-lib conversation with you about App Advisory, and we haven't caught up in quite a while. So it'd be very interesting also to hear what you've been up to. Before we sort of get stuck into it. Yes.
Yeah. I was going to mention one thing. So I'm going to jump in from a tech perspective. I'm madly rushing around in the background here trying to get us ready to go live onto Facebook. But of course, the technology is letting us down a little bit. So just before we introduce Jamie and we start getting into the juicy stuff, I'm going to try and spread this out a little bit and try and get this Facebook live stream working. We've got lots of participants, lots of attendees that are joining us on Zoom. That's awesome. Lots of familiar faces and names. And we're going to give it, we'll give it just a minute or so for other people to join us, and that'll also give me a little bit more time to hopefully get Facebook Live working. So just give me half a second. I'm very good at talking my way through things. So I'm clicking away.
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of these is that we've always, all these sessions are live. They're not pre-recorded. And there's always a bit of adjustments that need to happen before things get going, but I think that all makes for good content.
Facebook Live just is not working, so we might just have to forget about it. So that's fine. Let's get into it. I've actually got a little bit of an introduction slide just before we bring Jamie into the discussion, just to explain a little bit of the housekeeping for the Cloudcast today. This is very much an interactive Cloudcast, very much an interactive webinar. So I just want to bring my screen up here so that you can see a couple of things I've got up on the screen. I've got too many screens running, and I'm going to show my screen, and it's going to be screen number 3, and here we go. So a little bit of an intro slide there, but our next slide will show us. There's a little bit of an intro slide. Sky Accountants and Wize Mentoring, where Jamie's from. But we've got there's a screen here showing the tools that we've got available to us today. So like I said, this is very much an interactive Cloudcast. We want questions. We're going to provide answers as we go along. So please utilize the Q&A tool, depending on which device you're on, whether you're on a laptop or a desktop or a mobile device. You'll see, there we go, I'm getting a message saying the streaming's not working. That's good. You'll see the Q&A tool either up the top of the screen or down the bottom of the screen, but please use the Q&A tool as we're going through. Ask the questions, and if it's relevant to the discussion, we're monitoring the questions as we go. We will bring them into the discussion as we're going through if they are relevant. So please use the Q&A tool so that we can make this as interactive as possible. And now we can get into a bit of an intro on Jamie. So, sorry to interrupt there, Jeff. Would you like to do the intro of Jamie, or should we let Jamie do the intro of Jamie?
We'll let Jamie do the intro of Jamie, but I guess I'll just lead in with a preface that I've known Jamie for a few years now, and we definitely always loved bouncing ideas off of each other, business owner to business owner. I've always found him to be really engaging, and he's always helped me as a business owner identify issues about working on the business, not in the business. And I guess the reason to bring Jamie in on this Cloudcast is it's on the tail end of our highly successful CERT camps. And there are going to be a lot of our partners that are out there that are wanting to wrap up the year, have a nice holiday break, and then in the new year try to put together a bit of a game plan in terms of where do they take their business, and how do they really take some bold steps in the right direction towards app advisory. And I couldn't think of a better person to have that discussion with than Jamie. He's always got some real concrete advice and able to give you some real simple bits of information that you can really take on board and run with. And so I guess, yeah, with that, I want to hand over to Jamie, and maybe you can give us a bit of an introduction and tell us a little bit about what you've been up to.
Yeah, thanks, Clint and Jeff. I have known you guys for quite a few years now. And yeah, so thanks for having me on your show. Yeah, basically, look, I started Sky Accountants back in 2004 and grew it to a point where I sort of got stuck, I guess. And I've had every coach and been to every seminar you could ever imagine. And then started getting mentored by a chap called Ed Chan about 4 years ago. But on that journey, I always loved computers. And so anything new gadget, if anyone knows me personally at home, I think I've got every gadget at home you can imagine, from the watering system being turned on automatically to lights off and on, all sorts of things. So I love add-ons, I love apps, and developing some apps of my own, of course. And so yeah, so it was literally 1 week ago, Brenton Ward and I and Ed Chan launched a new online business for accountants mainly, but some bookkeepers have signed up as well, called Wize Mentoring. And so in a nutshell, that's really a bottling up of intellectual property of all the IP that I've got and what Ed Chan had built over the last 30 years with around 170 staff and about 12 offices. And Chan and Naylor sort of really runs without Ed in that sense and pays him a passive income. And when I met Ed, I said, well, I want some of that. How do you do that? And then finally, I got, I guess, Sky Accountants to sort of run without me. And now I just act as the CEO and go to work every day and just work on the business and not in the business. And I worked out that was my flow. That wasn't work to me. So if I have to start at 5 in the morning and finish at 10 at night, it doesn't matter because it's just not work. It's so I've got to find the balance where I do get balance because I just love what I do, I guess. And so the Wize Mentoring is to share that with everyone. But of course, a big part of that journey is all the technology. And I was just saying to Jeff and Clinton, I've been in the Philippines for a week with our staff of 10 people there, and just mixing with them. And they're such positive, motivated people. It's fantastic to have a global view and have distributed teams and all working towards the same thing, the same goal. But it's all driven by technology that we've got these days, which is what you two guys are all about, is the apps and the technologies to help our clients. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, and so what do you think is, like, for a lot of the listeners that are out there, we're obviously sort of embarking upon a bit of evolution in what is the traditional accountant or bookkeeper. What do you think are the opportunities there, or what are some sort of real key sort of technologies that you think could shift the way, businesses run traditionally?
Yeah, look, I was sort of talking about this with some colleagues while I was away, and we really think that the artificial intelligence will obviously continue, particularly in the bookkeeping. So it's probably a no-brainer, but that's just going to really continue to drive the cost down at a transactional level. So, traditionally the old days where we were just like, I don't know, even as 5 years ago, we were just data entry. And there's still so many small businesses that, we meet. We had a quite a large business the other day, and they were still using in Sydney just spreadsheets to do their annual accounts. And the reason was the CEO or the CFO, the guy running it, he was like about 65, and he didn't even sort of understand accounting packages and things. So you've got this whole generational change at the moment where you've got the baby boomers selling their businesses, and so there's massive demographic shifts, but that filters right down to the software and the technology that the business owners use. So I think, Jeff, you'll get a big change in the artificial intelligence in the next 5-10 years, and that'll be at the basic transactional level because it's just so repetitive. It's just so repetitive. But what that'll mean is that, you know, to do the same amount of work, you'll just need less people. You know, I think I was talking to Ed Chan yesterday, and we had another webinar, and he said, you know, back in the 1980s, to do about $1 million in fees and turnover, you needed about 15 people. And so in about 5 years' time, it might be we only need 3 people, if that makes sense. So the gross margin, I suppose I'm being an accountant, the gross profit margin hasn't really changed in all that time. But what it does mean is because of the automation, you just need less people to do the work. And if that sees, you know, pressures on prices dropping, you know, that probably remains to be seen. You know, you'd have to sort of do an Australia-wide survey to say, you know, is the price of bookkeeping, is the price of, you know, preparing BASs and tax returns, is that dropping? And you know, I haven't seen too much of that yet in Australia. Yeah.
So that's artificial intelligence is something that I've been learning a lot about lately. And I think it's something like technology is inevitable, like innovation is inevitable. You can't hold it back. It's almost like trying to hold back a wave. It's just, you can maybe control the height of it and the speed of it, but it's always going to move forward. And I think that is like when people hear artificial intelligence, they don't understand it. They don't understand what it means in the context of how they do business. But I think automation and machine learning is something that absolutely applies to accounting and bookkeeping.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right? And that's already happening. And I think the thing at a high level, what it means to a lot of us is that we've now entered this stage where data is the fuel for artificial intelligence, right? So the more data we can feed into the accounting file, the more the artificial learning. So once we had the data, we saw in the last 3 years, the dashboards was the new thing, right? Being able to pump the data in and see all this data on a dashboard and wow, look at all the data in one place. We never had that before. Yeah. But that's actually going to be superseded now with artificial intelligence, because what AI is going to do for business owners is it's not only going to take the data and feed off of it, it's actually going to help the business owner make better business decisions. Because dashboards, while it presents that data for people, you still have to be able to look at it, process it, and be able to make educated decisions. Whereas what AI is going to do is it's going to look at that data and it's going to preemptively say to a business owner, your cash flow is slowing down. You know, you need to be doing these things. These are the things that we can see in the data that you should be actioning. And it's going to help business owners make better business decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100% with that. And, you know, when I started out by myself, you know, I used to use, you know, I would just do the work and I wouldn't so much look at, you know, my monthly profit and loss or all that sort of thing, but just to manage my own business. But then as I grew and got more technology and more apps, then the other sort of part to bring it full circle is to make sure that you get your team on board with what the data is saying as well. You know, it's a classic example the other day. My firm was, you know, we're looking at capacity planning, for example, and it's all about data. It's data, 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 but then you have to bring the human influence into it and the leadership side of it, so that Jeff, everyone interprets the data in the same way. So it's one thing having the technology; it's the next thing making sure that your team, and as you're, you know, whether you're a bookkeeper or an accounting firm, making sure that, you know, the team are aligned around, you know, what are the actual dashboards telling us. What is the data telling us? And so that we're all on the same page, because, you know, we have this saying is if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go a long way, go together. And yeah.
And so, you know, at the last XeroCon, they were talking about AI being the next industrial revolution, the fourth industrial revolution. And I truly believe that. And I think there are a lot of people that are scared that AI is going to, you know, people are going to lose jobs over AI. And I don't think that that's true. I mean, if you look at, you know, the past industrial revolutions where, you know, they thought that robots would get rid of humans because we wouldn't be manning production lines and things. yes, while robots did replace that, humans evolved, right? We created new jobs as a result
There's new
of
jobs. Yeah, there's new
Correct.
jobs get created. Exactly.
Exactly. So I think, one of the messages we had in the CERT camp is that, we're all sort of like still having this message, like as advisors, we're having this message about the cloud and moving to the cloud. We're saying to advisors that is now sort of, that's late adoption. Like businesses that aren't moving to the cloud now, that's not innovative anymore. That's actually late adoption. Like businesses need to be in the cloud. We're now reaching a point in the technology shift that if a business isn't in the cloud, they're actually going to miss out. They're going to actually miss the boat, right? So my advice to our advisors tuning in is be ready for the next wave of innovation, right? Which is AI. And how can you leverage that technology and be at the forefront of that technology and build a business around that opportunity rather than being scared of it? Because that technology is going to come in. And I can tell you right now that Clinton and I's business, Cloud Integrators, we are a byproduct of riding that wave of innovation of cloud adoption and integration. That's why we came about. That was the opportunity that we took. But there's another wave that's about to happen. And if partners are not sort of identifying that is where they need to be positioned, then they'll just be sort of following along until we get to that stage where AI becomes mass adoption and then late adoption again, and they'll miss that boat. So my question to you is, what are those opportunities? Like if AI is coming, automation, machine learning, these are all things that are already around us, even though people don't acknowledge it. It's already happening.
Yeah.
What is that role then? What role does an advisor have to? How can humans evolve? How can an advisor evolve their practice to leverage that technology, but still create a value benefit as a human?
Yeah, I think the answer, Jeff, is in a really practical sense. So if you're meeting with your clients once or twice a year, or whether you're meeting them quarterly or monthly or whatever it is, you really need to be mindful of the client's internal systems and processes, because another example is we met some new clients this week, and large hospitality client, and they were doing all their payroll just like manually, like totally manually, for like 40 staff. And the owner of the business is absolutely flat out, and the bookkeeper, I think, was retiring. He never had time maybe to move to the cloud. So it's the opportunity, Jeff, is at a real practical sense, is to look at every client you've got and say, you know what, how can they do it better? How can they embrace the cloud? How can they grab an app, whether it's Deputy or KeyPlay or whatever? Because for us at Sky Accountants, we specialize and have a vertical in hospitality, as you know. Because as you said earlier, like there's 700 apps, and you just can't be over 700 apps. So, the point that I take away is for the listeners is grab a vertical, be a specialist in that particular area, and then every client that you talk to, you can talk their lingo. If it's hospitality, it's hospitality. If it's tradies, it's tradies. But the opportunity lies with the existing technology is in improving what they have, because if you improve what they have, and when the artificial intelligence comes along, they'll be well placed to take advantage of it, and you won't be sort of like, lagging behind all the opportunity. So, so look at your existing clients and just get practical. Which clients are entering stuff in manually? Like the classic example is the timesheets. And if you work through every client, you'll pick up, in some clients' cases, you'll be able to change 80% of what they do. In other clients, they might be well advanced. You might be able to change, tweak 10%. So, the opportunity.
I've got a question there, Jamie. How do you approach it? How do you broach the subject with the client? This is something that came up in the workshops that we ran in our certification camps recently. Was what's the next step? Yes, I can see these clients that they need to do something. There's an opportunity there for them to use technology, but how do you start the conversation to say, you're doing it the old way?
I'll tell you how. So we do it the same way that we do it internally. So, you know, what happens is one of my team members will come to me and say, as a CEO, say, Jamie, look, I think we should use this piece of software. I'll say, okay, we'll do a business case for it because I've got 5 other people who might say no. Right? So he'll do a business case and come to me and give me a return on investment. So we'll look up, you know, what's it cost? What's it cost to implement? What's it going to cost to train everyone? What's all the costs? And then we'll work out as best we can what the benefit is in either cost savings or monetary term or additional sales or whatever it is. You know, I'll give you a classic example. We did that with Practice Ignition, and we worked out the cost and we worked out the savings, and the business case said, you know what, we should do it simply based on return on investment. So when you go to your clients and you've identified, right, an opportunity for an app or whatever it may be, present it to them in a business case because they're business people. And if the return on investment is good, then, you know, just focus on the results. Don't get emotional about it. Just focus on the results like a CEO would or a small business person should, and say, well, look, it's going to cost you this to do it, but this is the return on investment it's going to give you year 1, year 2, year 3, and then the numbers will speak for themselves. The numbers will speak for themselves. So have the conversations with your clients and focus on return on investment, because then, you know, you can tweak the numbers a bit, but if you don't focus on the return on investment, then they're going to get all emotional on you, and then you'll say, oh, my partner doesn't want to do this because of X, Y, Z, and my staff won't do this because of, you know, they haven't done that before, and that's more work. And but if you focus on the numbers, guys, just focus on the return on investment. It's like buying a piece of equipment. You know, why are we buying this piece of equipment? It's going to cost us $5,000. What return is it going to give us? What benefit are we going to have? So that's the best advice we could give you.
I think I guess I'm sorry, Jeff. I'll just add one more thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm thinking about it from one step back from there before you get to the point of talking to the client about, oh, this is the right tool for you, the right solution for you. It's going to provide a return of X, Y, and Z. Just getting them in the right frame of mind, I suppose, to understand that they need to change. That you know, I guess we take a 2-stage approach. We do a scoping session first. We do an assessment with the business to understand what they're doing. And from the bookkeeper and accountant's perspective, you can see that the client is doing things the old way. They're filling out paper timesheets, or they're doing job cards, or they're doing paper invoices, whatever it might be. Whatever the bookkeeper or the accountant identifies as the pain point, I suppose, in the business, how does the bookkeeper or accountant have that conversation with their client to say, you need to change. There are tools that you can use to make life better. You need to change. Some feedback we got from our attendees at the certification camp was they didn't know how to have that initial conversation, or what questions to ask, or what items to address to get the client ready to then engage with a cloud integrator to do an assessment.
Yeah. So really the approach that you've got to have there is, I sort of relate it to the 80-20 rule or Pareto principle. So at the start, when you've got a client base or any number of clients and you want to introduce an app or you know, a cloud application, whatever it is, you might find that 80% of them are open to it at the start. And then you might find the other 20% take a lot of educating. So the only way to do it, Clinton, is to what Ed and I always say is drip on people. So, you know, you might sort of bring it up. You might have lunch with the client. You might have a coffee with the client and say, look, I've reviewed your systems and I've done some workings, and you know, and I can see what's best practice, you know, within the industry, and I think you should be using this app. And they might push back, like they'll push back, just like you said at the start. And then the next month when you see them again, you have to remind them again. And if any of us have been, you know, in teams, or if we've got kids, I've got 4 kids, you know, to change human behavior and habit, it's very hard. For some people, it's really hard. So just be realistic that change is hard, because what you're talking about, Clinton, is change management. And the way to overcome change management is to keep reinforcing the positives. And you might have to drip on, you know, some people it takes one drip, the early adopters, and we've all seen we've seen the graph of the early adopters and the late adopters. So your client base is no different. You'll have early adopters, And you won't need to educate them much. They'll just say, they'll be like Jamie Johns, wow, let's do it, But then you'll have other people who are sort of a little bit late adopters, and you might have the majority sort of in that bell curve, if you like, and you have to keep educating them. Then you'll have the late adopters where, it might take about 10 lunches before they decide to do it. But often what happens is they're talking to their, brother-in-law who's got the business up the road, and he just says, oh, you know what, I just got this great app called Deputy. And then they say, oh, that's my account or my bookkeeper, Carla, she's been telling me about that for the last 2 years. So the message I can give to everyone is don't give up. It's what we call the drip method. It's educating, it's educating your clients, and some will instantly grab it and get it, and others might take 20 times before they change a habit. And for those of you who have got teams, like 10, 5, 10, 15, 20 or 30 people, your teams is the same thing. You'll have some of the guys on your team will say, yeah, let's go and do it. But then you need to drip and educate on your teams to bring them with you to get alignment, because as I said earlier, you don't want to be the guy that I used to be a few years ago, charging out the front 2Ks and say, let's go and do this. And the troops will all be 2Ks behind me. What you want is you want to go together, but go a long way. And that takes leadership. So you've got to lead your clients. You've got to keep leading them. And, the old saying is first seek to understand before being understood, which is in Dr. Stephen Covey's book. If you just listen and build rapport and get inside your client's head, because there might be some fears in there, almost a bit like a psychologist, that you didn't realize that they're scared of. So, first seek to understand before being understood. And, that can help go a long way as well.
Yeah. So I think what you're saying is like, if there's not an accounting firm out there that doesn't see the benefit of using tools like Receipt Bank to automate processes. And they're all like, you wouldn't see a firm today sort of competing with other firms that aren't leveraging the benefits of that automation. So just getting back to the AI part of this discussion, firms are now embracing that, and that's making their businesses more efficient, and they're being more, they're lowering their bottom line. It's making, they're using less man hours, they're providing better data. But the data itself, even with artificial intelligence and all this stuff that we're talking about, getting back to your point, it's still not going to see, I think the opportunity as an advisor is, yes, going out there, being human, looking at, like, even if you saw the data of a hospitality business, you wouldn't know that unless you ask the question that, how are you doing your timesheets? The data is not going to show that they're manually entering that in. That's an opportunity. Yeah. And then secondly, managing the change management. Automation and AI is not going to help customers go through that change management. And that's certainly the thing that we do a lot of is managing that customer journey. When is that customer ready to take on board? How much are they able to bite off and action and not bite off too much? And how do we, that's invariably the difference in every client that we deal with is the client.
If I can just come in there, Jeff, it's really, really important whether you're doing tax returns or you're implementing a new app, as you're suggesting, is the managing the client's expectations. Like, if you can manage the client's expectations in the change management, you're a winner. But as soon as you drop the ball and you over-promise and under-deliver, that's what you don't want. Yeah, we have tools and tips and techniques that you guys will have. But one thing we have with, the integration of Receipt Bank and different, we let you guys do the add-ons, but we have a thing called Who Does What. So we have one column for the client and one column, for the bookkeeper or the accountant. And you sit down and you have the face-to-face discussion about who does what. And that list can be, say, 40 things long, and then we sign it, and then the client signs it. So straight away, you're setting the expectation around, that's your role to do this, because when you move to the cloud, guys, as you know, it opens up this whole sort of teamwork sort of play where, one person needs to do their bit, and the bookkeeper or the accountant needs to do their bit. So, who does what form, use something like that as a template that we've got and manage those expectations, Jeff, as you said, and because it's all change management. And we want to move forward people into the technology, don't we?
Yeah, and I suppose the question I have is that, like, for a lot of accounting firms, this is playing a completely different role to their client, right? Like going in and asking those questions about how they run their business, managing change management is a different skill set and a different service. And so what advice do you have for people that are not used to doing that? How should they start out? And then more importantly, how do they package that and price it out as a service? Because I see a lot of firms going down that okay, they go, okay, we're going to start with this client. This client's asking me about stock control. I feel endeavored to help them out. I want to help them out. But then they don't end up monetizing that. They undervalue their services. And so one of the biggest questions we've had in our cert camps is, how do you price things out? Like how did you do it? Like, how did you start? How do you wrap up and how do you value that time that you're spending on that change management piece?
Yeah, in a nutshell, we sort of because at Sky Accountants, we fixed price every job we just about do. So we've got a bookkeeping calculator, or we just look at a job like a project and then we price it. And so we price it very strictly around gross profit. So we know the cost of our staff, we know the targets and the KPIs that we want to meet, Jeff. So every job we just frame it around our key performance indicators, and we price it around that system, because that's goals, and that's what you want. You want to hit your goals. So, if you get all your little jobs or your projects, price it around using your gross profit, for example. And that's exactly what we do. So, we've got templates and spreadsheets developed where you just plug in how much time it's going to take you to do a certain project. And then
a lot of people don't know how much time.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter. We fix price. That's a good question. If you scope it out, like back in the early days, when we did it in the early days, whether, if what we were doing, whether it was Xero or Receipt Bank, yeah, we probably a little bit of guesswork. But, by the time now we get a new client, and, rule number one, we want to see their, Xero file or their MYOB file, whatever it is. So, yeah, it's really, really important, Jeff, to follow due process and to follow what works. So, number one is move the client to the cloud. Number two is, in order to scope the project, I need to look at the file. Over the years, I've had the odd client said, prospect or lead, if you like, said, oh, no, I don't want to give you access to the file because it's confidential. And I would just say, well, look, I'll sign a non-disclosure document. And, you got to, every client that you meet, every prospect that you meet doesn't have to be a client, because it's business by design, not by default. So rule number one is get access to the file and scope the job properly. How much time is it going to take? And you might know, but you need to make the best estimate that you can, Jeff.
I guess here's the classic example, because we've had this discussion internally, that you could have a business of the same industry type, same number of staff, same turnover, sell the same product. On the cover, they look like the same business, and inherently what makes them different is the business owner, right? Like that change management. You either have one person that is really easy to manage, and in some cases, like you could have a larger business where the change management is actually easier because there's more support there. There's more people working in the business that understand their role than the small business that has only one owner operator that wears many hats. So
yeah,
how do you, I know there's a lot of people out there that would be wondering, well, how do you account for that? Like when you're scoping out your time, how do you account for that? Because the variable factor there is the change management in the business owner or the person you're dealing with.
Yeah, so I think the key for us, what we've done and what we've even sort of brought into the templates within Wize Mentoring is particularly this template of who does what and then timeframes. See, the problem is, right, a lot of us can rush in, and it's what we call quad 1 and quad 2. So if you get the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, it's about time management. A lot of us just, we spend our time in urgent and important, and that's just, giving a quote, accepting it, and just trying to roll it out, and then we find that the implementation fails. the success comes in the planning. The more that you plan a project, the more that you get to know the business owner, the more that you set smart goals even around that project. And when I say smart goals, I mean who does what, and then timeframes on that, and then how often are they held accountable to that project. So one of the things that you should be trying to influence your clients to do is sort of have like a weekly tactical meeting. And that's just a weekly meeting to say, let's look at this project every Thursday to see if we're hitting targets. And if we're on time, or if we're not, has Joe done his bit so that Mary can do their bit? Because if you don't control the project, it will just fall to the wayside. And as business owners have, other priorities will come in and take over. So it's about leadership. You've really got to drive the expectations from the upfront. You've got to do a really nice proposal around who does what time frames, and how everyone's going to be held accountable. And it should be like weekly at minimum. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually something we've implemented ourselves. We call it a client review, and it's a 30-minute review. It's very focused. It's intended to go over what needed to be done, what got done, who needs to do it, by when, and what are some of the inherent issues that may have arisen as we've gone through that process.
That's perfect.
Yeah. And it's been really good because it gives people that platform where they know that there's a platform for them to raise issues as issues come about, and that time is actually accounted for.
Yeah. That's right. And see, people sometimes say that, meetings are a waste of time. Well, they're not. They actually save time. They actually give you more freedom, and they'll make you more money if you do them right. Yeah. Yeah,
and if those meetings are planned, then they're actually accounted for in our project plan. Whereas where we've been reactive in sort of addressing things, where we haven't been, identifying these things up front, that's where we've always had lost time.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So the key takeaway, if I could summarize it, is the more planning you do, the more that you work in not urgent and important, which is quad 2, the more that you spend in that quadrant, the quicker, the more streamlined that any project or job that you're doing will roll out. That's the key.
I think I'll add something else in there as well, and this is relevant for our clients that we're putting project management tools in for, is that if you plan out that project at the start and you're putting your allowances against the different things and tasks and activities that are being completed, you've then got something to measure against, and you obviously need the right tools to allow you to track your time against those tasks or those activities, so that you can go back and analyze, how did we go on this project? And this is something that so many tradies are up against, is that they don't have the tools and the ability to go to quote a project and then go back and analyze it. Go, how did we go? Where do we make money? Where didn't we make money? Where do we need to sharpen the pencil? So the technology, if you're doing all of that planning at the start, you've then got the framework to put into your management system, whatever tool you're using, to then give you those measurements. They'll give you those metrics to measure against. And going back and analyzing, to answer your question, Jeff, about people don't know how long it's going to take. Once you do a project, you go back and analyze it and you go, well, we need to allow more time for X, or this went really well. We can cut back on the cost of that particular thing. So they go hand in hand.
That's exactly right. Like, you can have all the best technology in the world and the best apps and the artificial intelligence, but unless you bring the management of all that technology within the team and human environment, it doesn't mean anything. That's what I learned. That's where my firm got stuck quite a few years ago. I had the team, I had the technology, but what I lacked was the leadership of how to bring it all together. And so that was the key, that is bringing the team together to what you're getting at, Clinton, is what you can measure, you can manage. And if you do that weekly, we sort of do that like minimum weekly with what we call a weekly tactical catch up. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good.
I wanted to ask you, because I often make reference to our partners that there's an opportunity for them to specialize in a vertical, and for them to build an actual business around a specific vertical if they really get to understand the lingo, the language, the workflows. It's, in fact, one of the things we cover in our cert camps is the difference in lingo or the context or the language or the definitions when you cross over between different verticals. And whenever I make that statement, I'm always thinking about Sky Accountants, because Sky Accountants was one of the first that I knew of that really sort of said we specialize in hospitality. So do you want to talk a little bit about why you did that, and what does that actually mean? Like why did you decide to label Sky Accountants across that vertical, and what did you need to do to be able to achieve that?
Yeah, it's a good question, Jeff, and I'll probably take it one step back even further, because a lot of accountants and bookkeepers over the past few years have said to me, you know, Jamie, when you do specialize, doesn't that stop all the other sort of clients and referrals coming to you? And that's one fear that people have. But the answer is it doesn't. So with your marketing dollar and your marketing budget and your efforts with your marketing, if you hone that into a particular vertical, I can tell you in first instance, it doesn't stop all the other referrals coming to us. Like, you know, all your clients love what you do. If you service them, they'll just send you referrals, and they'll send you referrals from, you know, architects and builders and doctors. And so just because those people get referred to you doesn't mean that you don't do their work. That's the first point. What the marketing does, it's a long runway with the marketing and the specialization. But what that does is that means you become this knowledge person, this go-to person for that particular industry. And, you know, it's always the specialist that gets paid the more than, you know, the GP or the general practitioner. So when you're going into, you know, when you're going into a sales meeting, because let's face it, you know, the specialization helps you around the sales. Because when you're going to a meeting and you've got a book that you've written on a particular area, or all your marketing with testimonials is from other, say, you know, people in your industry, you're so much more positioned to convert that client across than if you have no idea about that industry at all. So it's the specialization and it's the sales process and it's the discussions that you have that you wouldn't have, I'd guarantee, if you don't understand that person industry. You know, hospitality, and even for us, you know, our sort of laser focus is on the gaming clubs. You know, there's clubs throughout Australia, and all the clubs have the same issues. You know, when they're not making money, they generally have about, you know, 3 or 4 things why they're not making money. So if you can, you know, choose a vertical, but then really, if you can choose an area within the vertical and become known as the specialist, when you're having those conversations, Jeff, it makes the conversion of the sale so much easier than being a generalist, you know. So it just has so many benefits. You know, you can probably be competitive in terms of your pricing could be higher because you're seen as this go-to person. You know, convincing a prospect to come to you because you're a specialist is easier than if you just, you know, you've got no branding or whatever around the particular area. So there's just so many benefits from specializing. And not only that, Jeff, you don't have to know 700 apps. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we are, it's funny you use that analogy because we use it ourselves in terms of describing the relationship of our partners to us. So we do think that that the accounting partner should play the role of the GP to the client, in a sense of they should be able to identify what the symptoms are in the business. They use manual, you know, cash drawers and manual timesheets, and there are real symptoms that they can identify. But I guess, and they would be using us in the context of us being the specialists because we're the hospitality specialists. But I guess,
or the app, yeah,
or the app. But I guess you could still present yourself as the specialist. I guess this was the unique thing, is that Sky Accountants, you don't do the point of sale setups in cafes, but you still position yourself as a specialist in that vertical market because you understand, you can identify what the problems are in the industry, you understand the workflows, you understand the real problems that the gaming industry faces, and you can have that conversation with that client because you understand that industry, even though you don't actually deliver.
We don't actually do deliver. Yeah,
Correct.
it's just marketing. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, we used to have a cash drawer in one of our front reception in their other office. But did you think we knew how to open it? No, but when the client walked into reception, they saw that, you know, we had like an iPad with a cash drawer there, and I think, you know, well, someone told me how to hit a button there, and it opened. But it's, you know, marketing's all perception. If that's the message, you know, marketing and the success of any business is, it's most of the time it's 80% marketing. And if you're a good marketer and you can convince people that you're good at that area, okay, you might have to have some substance later on, but the substance is you guys. I'll just say, oh yeah, look, we're hospitality specialists. We know apps. You know what? You need to get Counter or whatever it is. Go and see Jeff. You know, Jeff's our partner, and you're the substance. I'm just the shiny guy. I'm the sizzle. You're the sausage. Yeah.
Yeah, that's gold. So I noticed on your website, on the Sky Accountants website, Jamie, there's a whole list of apps that you've got scrolling across the page, and that was one of my questions for today. You obviously don't implement those. You rely on a partner to help you with that stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because, I mean, my model of, I guess, an ideal business is a commercial profitable enterprise that runs without the owner. So if I want it to run without the owner, I have to have, you know, ordinary sort of people, if I can put it that way, and extraordinary systems. So if I turn that on its head and say, well, look, I'm going to install all these apps, I'm going to know all these things that we're advertising, then it's upside down. Then I have to have extraordinary people. And we all know people. Who the hell knows like 10 apps inside out, back to front? You know, like, you have to pay that guy, that person, an extraordinary amount. And then are you going to keep that person? Probably not. So, you know, again, it comes back to perception. Is we're the go-to people for hospitality. We can talk the lingo, like when their gross profit's not working, you know, when their wages is too high. You know, that's all about management. And to help you do management, you use apps. You need to measure and manage. But if you don't measure it, you can't manage. So how do you measure it? You know, you get things like Deputy and Counter and Vend and all the things that you guys do. And then you're seen as the specialist, and with a referral network that makes you even a more valuable person, because then if you refer them to, say, Jeff or Clinton, and you guys successfully roll it out, and you know, you have your who does what and when and why, and you manage the client's expectations, it can be a great experience for the client, who, you know, was here when they started, and at the end of the project they're up here and they're so much happier, and they've got a team of people that they can rely on.
I think that's the most unique thing that we're trying to advocate. Is like, when we do get a partner like Sky Accountants that understands their role of having KPIs, or if you want to call them biomarkers, you know, that the actual process of regularly checking up on the client, measuring them, understanding what are the biomarkers that show success or show failure, but then working together with us to make sure that we can action that, you know, because if you were merely just looking at the, you know, biostatistics of the business and you had no way to actually implement that change, then it's really sort of passive thinking. You know, it's hoping the business is going to be able to improve. But if we can sort of work together in partnership and install those apps that we know are going to improve on the biomarkers that you've identified, that's the perfect relationship that we're looking for.
And it's complementary skills, Jeff. Like, even within teams or with your clients or working with you, you know, you don't want to have 3 CEOs, or you don't want to have, you know, 3 Jeffs or 3 Clintons. Like, it's complementary skills is about synergy, you know, so which is, you know, 1 + 1 = 3, more or less. And when you can work in a team and the accountant can do their bit, Clinton can do his bit, and the client does their bit, and you keep the rhythm and routine of that communication going, you know, sometimes daily, at minimum weekly, then you can achieve the projects and set targets, dates, who does what, and that'll help the projects be implemented. And keep educating your clients. As I said earlier, you know, there's early adopters, there's late adopters, but it's perseverance and persistence, and don't give up, because sooner or later they'll come across to the cloud. Yeah.
We've had a question come through, Jamie, from the audience about deciding. How do you decide about what shared apps as against what operational apps? So in our recent certification camps, we talk about the difference between the shared apps that the accountant or bookkeeper and the client use together, things like receipt bank,
Oh yeah, yep.
where there's a kind of a shared usage
Shared
of those.
use. Yep.
Yep. Versus the operational apps, which is just an app that the client uses that the bookkeeper or the accountant doesn't get involved in. So how are you deciding, or what shared apps do you use within your practice? And are there any operational apps that you're recommending or referring to?
Yeah, I mean, with the share apps with Sky Accountants, we predominantly try and stick to Xero, but that doesn't mean that we don't take clients on who are in QBA and all the other areas. So there's a lot of shared apps like MYOB, QBO, Receipt Bank. There's those day-to-day apps that you use for bookkeeping. And some of that could even include, some of your dashboards like Spotlight reporting or whatever. But in terms of the operational apps, we just stick to hospitality because, once you choose a vertical, you just understand not just the app, you understand what the app does, but more importantly, understand the outcomes of the app, of what it can achieve. And normally that's a financial result. So from an operational point of view, if you choose a vertical, then you can talk the lingo around that vertical and the industry, but you can also talk about the apps and what's the objective of the apps, what's the outcome of using it, and and then, as I said earlier about the business case, what's the return on investment on this app or this piece of software, and that can help a bookkeeper and accountant determine what operational apps that they need to be aware of for their particular niche.
It's interesting you say that, because in the traditional world of a cafe getting a point of sale system, the manager would have gone out and sourced out a point of sale. And the function that the app would have played in the business was driven predominantly by the operational functionality. And after the point of sale would have been put in, it would have been handed over to the accountant, and then they would have tried to make it financially sensible, correct?
Make it fit.
So what you're saying is exactly right, is that the opportunity and what we're seeing is really, really unique when we work really well with a partner that really drives that discussion with their client, is to have a balance between what is the operational function that app is going to provide, combined with the financial function that it's going to use by integrating it, right? And doing that proactively before we set it up. And when we see our partners understand that role that they play and that they're guiding that discussion with the client, it makes our job so much easier. Because we find that when there is a clash between somebody going, oh, operationally, it needs to do this, this, and this, and they have absolutely no clue what that means financially, and they've got some office manager it's this tug of war in the business. But when the accountant can actually help mediate that conversation and say, you know what, we understand operationally you need to do this, but we also have to make sure that we're measuring it this way. The data has to flow in this way. Then it makes our job easier, because then we have a real framework for how we actually have to set it up.
Yeah. Another discussion that, might help the listeners and viewers is a term that Ed taught me is bottom-up management. And bottom-up management is really, in a nutshell, it's all about, say, me being overseas and knowing exactly like the KPIs and outcomes of, say, the 25 odd staff, whatever we've got. So I should be able to just jump on a dashboard or jump on the app and just know exactly where everyone's at or where the business is at without physically being there. And so if you have this discussion with your own clients around, bottom-up management in terms of, okay, if I'm away from the business, can I just log on and know, how it's going? And because if you know how it's going, that means that you're measuring something. And then when you're measuring it, you can still manage it. But it all comes back to the systems, which is really what bottom-up management is. It comes back to the systems that you've put in place so that you can measure it. And, how do you measure it? Well, you measure it with all the apps and the different things we're talking about for that particular industry. Tradies are a classic one, as you mentioned earlier, Clinton. They go in and they'll do a job, but they don't set often set KPIs and goals around the job. But then if they do, it's great that they can come back and say, did I go overtime, or did the materials run overtime? You know, where was it? So you can sort of have these discussions with your clients that lead them to the water, if I can put it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. I've got a question then. What tools do you use within your business to measure and manage?
Yeah, good question. We should bring up my cloud stack. You've put me on the spot. I have to remember it all. I'm a bit removed from that these days, but yeah, look, some of the apps, if I just run through what we use, is DocuSign. We use Xero Practice Manager, Xero. What else have we got there? We got Now Infinity, Class Super,
PI.
Practice Ignition. Yeah, brilliant product. Carbon, we use Carbon. So that's workflow management. And we also we've designed our own dashboard, or we call it a live metrics board, which is SharePoint. So we use SharePoint as well, and it's a really big product, but it's totally customizable, and I can make graphs and measure measuring things in whatever format visually that I need to see just really quickly. So I was on another webinar yesterday, and people were asking me, what's a great dashboard to have, all your systems, your procedures and your policies, because you want to systematize your business. And I think I've spoken to you two guys before about SOPs, standard operating procedures, which are just videos. And I think at Sky Accounts, we've got hundreds of videos now. Like, you just, how do you do this? How do you do that? So we just, when we do an induction or onboard a new staff member, it's just, well, look, watch these 10 videos, and if you don't know how to do it, come back to us. And so you get so much leverage out of that. But I know another platform people are starting to use is Google Sites. I don't know if you guys looked at that, but Google Sites.
We do a lot of work with Google. We're a Google G Suite partner. We've got hundreds and hundreds of businesses on there.
Yeah. So Google Sites is another one for a centralized sort of dashboard with, So the other thing I'd sort of probably to help everyone and to help your clients as well, get them to all have an intranet. It's the biggest game changer. One central point for all your systems, your procedures, your policies. Have it really organized. Have it searchable, because ultimately, depending on what you want from your business, what I wanted my business to run without me, and to give me the freedom that I was after sort of later on.
You got to pull all that data out of your head, all of that information out of your head, and put it somewhere that people can access it.
That's exactly right. I think I've done a course. I've been doing Dale Beaumont's business blueprint, and it's the same thing. He said exactly what you said, Clinton. Take all that data, all that knowledge that you've built up the last 10, 15, 20, 30 years, and put it in one central spot, because if you have the SOPs, the standard operating procedures, then you're not repeating yourself 1,000 times. And it's great. You can teach your clients this stuff. Google Sites or SharePoint or whatever it is. Teach your clients to help them grow their businesses, and give them the freedom that a lot of the time we all go out in business, don't we, to make more money, and I'm going to have more freedom. And then I think I found 7 years later, I was working 100 hours a week, and the wife was saying, "Are you still at work, Jamie? When are you coming home?"
That really resonates with a lot of people, I'm sure. Yeah, all right, we're out of time. We're out of time, guys. That's the fastest hour ever, I think.
Yeah. So there's no more questions.
No. We've got one more.
One more.
Can you tell us about Wize Mentoring and how it works? That shouldn't take long.
Oh, that's really quick.
Oh, yeah?
So, like in a nutshell, Wize Mentoring, it's about 4 sort of platforms or a network for accountants and bookkeepers. So the first one is what we call Wize Vault. So it's about 100 odd videos and building. And it's 18 steps, and it's 18 steps from Ed Chan of how he set up Chan & Naylor. He started from a home office, and how it grew to about 20 million turnover, and it basically runs without him and pays him a passive income. So about 9 months ago, I've been mentored by Ed for 4 years, and I said to Ed, we need to share this knowledge with accountants and bookkeepers, and the principles he teaches are the same anyone running a business. So in a nutshell, we bottled it up, and all the tools and all the intellectual property I had and all that Ed had, and we put them into the 18 steps that Ed said. And so I teamed up with another chap called Brenton Ward, and Brenton used to work for Rob Nixon and Slipstream Coaching for a time, and he's in Ireland full time. So we built this vault. So for $250 a month, you can get into this vault and methodically go through the 18 steps in your own time. But as you go through the 18 steps, you need to implement it, because the goal of the whole course is to get your business to run without you and pay you a passive income. In my case, I got to the point where I could CEO and I can just go to work and work on the business every day. So I literally don't see clients anymore. But that's what I wanted. That, one of the first steps, guys, he says, well, when you're 65, what do you want to be doing? So you have to set your goals clear to know what you want. And then you work backwards. So you work out what your ideal income is, what your overheads be, what team will you need, and what turnover will you need. And then you sort of go on this journey of withdrawing yourself from the business. So you withdraw yourself from the accounts, your own internal bookkeeping. Then you withdraw yourself from admin, and we all get a receptionist, and we know what that's like. So we stop answering our own phone, and we stop going to get our own email in the early days. Sorry, our mail in the early days. And then you stop doing production, which is the tax returns, and then you stop managing, which is a really big step. And so basically you go on this journey of withdrawing yourself from your business, as Ed did and as Ed mentored me to do. So that's really it. And then once a month we catch up for a Wize Live, which is a 2-hour clinic, just like this. So you get to talk to Ed and myself and Brenton. And you can ask us, what barriers, what are the things that you're hitting that you can't move forward on the journey. So we'll answer them personally. And then you get the Wize Tribe, which is the private Facebook group where you can, put your questions and things there, and we mentor and coach you through that as well. So so have a look. It's on the website there, Wize Mentoring, but it's designed ideally for accountants, but the principles apply very much to bookkeepers, of course, and then the wider small business community. But I've found once I learnt the principles, I could do business mentoring to pretty much any client, because it's a very methodical approach to growing your business and setting it up. Yeah.
I've just posted a link into the chat box. We had a question come through from Kim requesting a link to Wize Mentoring. So I've just put that into the chat box. You should see a URL you can click on, takes you to the web page. And I love on that homepage, you've got basically the pyramid structure with the withdrawal steps of taking yourself out of all the different stages. It's fantastic. Seems so simple in theory. It's just
it's been a few sleepless nights in there.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, no, it's all good fun. That's exactly it, Clinton. That pyramid, if people have a look at that pyramid, that's actually the exact journey that I went on, and it took me about, sort of to really finalise. It probably took me about 2 to 3 years to get down to the CEO level. Yeah.
Yeah. That's great, Jamie. I mean, I think it's great that somebody like yourself out there exists. I think more people would benefit from you, because you're not only providing an advisory mentoring service, but you're doing it from your own experience. So there's a lot of endorsement there and legitimacy from where that comes from, which is great. And we're really, really happy to have had you and had this discussion. So hopefully more people can find out more about the next chapter in your journey, which is great.
No problem. It's been great knowing you guys for quite a few years now, and every time there's a conference on, we always catch up, don't we? So, and we can share all this knowledge, what I've learned. More than happy to share it and help other people, which is what it's all about. Yeah.
Well, good man. Thank you, Jamie. Shame we couldn't get the Facebook live stream happening at the start, but that's right. We've recorded this, so we'll upload it to YouTube, and we'll post it on Facebook, and everyone can go nuts with all the sharing and all that stuff.
Sounds good.
Cool.
Sounds good.
Alrighty. Thank you, Jamie.
All right, see you guys.
Thanks very much.
See you guys. Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.